Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Darwin Centre Live, and welcome to anyone who might be joining us today on the internet. Today's session is being run by Paul Hilliard, who's from the museum's entomology department. Paul has an interesting job. He's the person you get when you ring up with a spider or an insect that you need to identify. And so, as you can imagine, he gets a really diverse array of inquiries. And I believe we had somebody in the audience who came in early with a butterfly. So that's the sort of thing that Paul does. But his real area of specialisation is spiders. And that's what he's going to be talking about today. We're going to be taking a bit of a safari through a whole range of different spiders. And if you've got any questions, do please feel free to ask them. But before we do that, I'd ask you to make welcome Paul Hilliard.
Thank you, Michael. Good morning, everybody. I'm here to talk about spiders. Spiders are a fascinating group and amazingly varied. A good starting point for their variation is the size. At one extreme, we have here a huge spider, the Mexican red-kneed tarantula. It's very pretty. It's not actually the world's largest species of spider. That is the Goliath tarantula from South America, which in the male can reach a leg span as much as 11 inches or 28 centimetres. Now, I prefer to refer to them as tarantulas rather than bird-eating spiders, because bird-eating spiders is an old sort of colonial term based on 18th century paintings which showed tarantulas eating hummingbirds, something that they're actually most unlikely to be able to do. This picture was taken at the London Zoo Friendly Spider Programme. And they say that if you can hold a tarantula at the end of this course on arachnophobia, then you're cured. But I would point out that this spider is extremely well fed. There's the abdomen. It's huge, really plump, and for that reason it's very, very placid, very docile. By contrast, we've got here an African tarantula, the baboon tarantula, and this is quite a different proposition altogether. These are much more aggressive, these spiders, certainly when defending their nest and their baby spiderlings. There's a fundamental difference between African tarantulas and South American ones. The South American tarantulas defend themselves by rubbing irritant hairs at a predator, but the on intimidation and aggressiveness. Here's a particularly attractive tarantula, the Indian ornamental tarantula. And because of that, it's become quite sought after as a collector's item, and unfortunately becoming very rare in the natural habitat. While we're looking at this, we can see the eyes. Like many spiders, most, in fact, we've got a little group of 8 eyes. Now, their visual ability is not great. They can detect light and dark, and they can see movement, but not much more than that. Spiders basically operate in a world of feelings, of vibration. At the other end of the size spectrum is a tiny species. This is a British domestic spider, Unops domesticus, found in houses. The fully grown female is no more than 1.5 millimetres in length. Though it is not by any means the world's smallest spider. That honour is taken by a species called Patu bigua from the South Pacific Islands, and the fully grown male in that case is only 0.5 of a millimetre in size, about the size of a pinhead. Now, when we think spiders, we think of webs, and here a picture taken on a nice dewy morning in October, the best season for spiders' webs. You can see bushes. I think these are gorse. They're festooned with spiders' webs. You've got many individual webs here, tangle webs, and in the middle of each is a spider. One thing I would ask you to note is that all the webs are on the rigid shrubs here, none at all on the loose foliage of the trees behind. This scene shows 2 different kinds of webs. In the centre, you've got the 2-dimensional orb web with a spider at the hub. just there. And it's in a wide space. It's quite high up, this orb web. In fact, it has a long bridge thread supporting it. Orb webs are rebuilt on a daily basis. The spider rolls up the old web, and the resulting size of all that web is only about the size of a grain of rice. It then eats that to recycle the nutrients and builds the web fresh, normally in the morning. So that, as I say, the orb web is fresh and sticky, and that's very important for catching insects. Around, though, here, lower down, we see a number of small sheet webs. These are three-dimensional structures, and they are quite like the cobwebs, which I think comes up in the next scene, yeah. Here are the kind of webs that people don't like. Cobwebs that renewed each day. They just persist, even long after the spider has died, and just collect dust. So, cobwebs are not popular, generally. I'd just like to point out that not everything that looks like it's made by a spider is actually made by a spider. Not all silk is the work of spiders. Here we've got the nest of moth caterpillars. Now, this is public enemy number one, certainly in this country. And in fact, it is the spider that makes those cobwebs. This is a Tegenaria house spider, the largest of the genus. We've got about 6 species in this country. This is Tegenaria parietina, and that, in fact, can reach a considerable size. Its leg span as much as 5 inches, and that is a British species. In fact, they're very, very common, and in the late summer and autumn, these spiders invade our houses in large numbers. It's always the males, and here you can see it's a male with those swellings on the ends of its palps. That's the male sex organs. And they move around looking for a female. They leave their cobweb, move in search of a female, and unfortunately many get stuck in the bath or the sink. They haven't come there for a drink. They just can't climb out. Unfortunately, their feet or tarsi don't allow them to go up the sides of the bath. Many other spiders would be able to do it easily, but this one can't. I think this spider is in fact responsible for all the arachnophobia we have in this country. I estimate at least half the population is afraid of spiders, and while arachnophobia is a genuine phobia, it's an exaggerated, irrational fear. I think you still, nevertheless, can explain it, certainly in this country. It's because we've got these Tegenaria house spiders, and they invade our houses in large numbers. I think that's why we're a nation of arachnophobics.
Is anyone here arachnophobic, by the way? Got anybody afraid of spiders here? No one. Oh, fantastic. Excellent. One. An ex-arachnophobe. And Mark, our technician behind the camera there, is also slightly disturbed by the whole thing.
I think genuine arachnophobic people wouldn't be able to be here. They wouldn't be able to sit through this.
Is this spider a risk at all? Is it dangerous, or is it a harmless one?
It can give you a nip, but that would probably be the worst. You shouldn't pick them up. I've done that in the past. Tried to be brave, pick one up, and I have had a nip from one. But that would be the very worst that you would suffer. This is the old skin of a Tegenaria spider. Now, some people think, good, it's a dead spider. But it isn't. It's now still alive, this spider, and it's now bigger. Spiders molt their skin about 10 or 12 times in their lifetime. On the final molt, they become adult. They move on and leave their skin behind. Now, here we have a spider in the center of its orb web. I think the spider sitting at the hub in the center of all these lines of communication was the original inspiration for the electronic web. And this picture was taken at night, and I would just like to briefly describe how the spider builds the web. You can't here see the bridge thread, but you saw that in the earlier orb web. It's out of sight above. Having put the bridge thread in, and that is a question that people often ask, how do they span gaps? Well, they don't walk the line around. they allow a line of silk to drift out on the breeze, and when they feel it attached to something, they then pull it tighter, run across, strengthen it a few times. That's it, they've got their bridge thread. They then drop down and start putting in the general framework threads. They then create the hub and put in all the radii or spokes of a wheel out to the frame, and then supported by further points, of attachment, branches, things like that. They then finally put in the spiral thread, this thread going around and around and around, and that is the thread that is sticky. If you look at it under a microscope, that thread is beaded with little globules of gummy silk. As I say, the morning is the best time to watch a spider spinning an orb web, and it takes about 1 hour to do it. And then at the end of the day, they take it all down, eat it, as I said, and then start again. Here is, if we were talking about the house spiders, the Tegenarias being the commonest spiders in houses in this country, this is the commonest spider in gardens, the garden spider. It's an orb web weaver, and it's sitting in the middle of its web, and it's feeding on an insect. I can't identify exactly which insect that is, I don't know, but you can recognize the spider by the white cross markings, which they usually have, and the banded legs. And really, this is an incredibly abundant species. It's in virtually everybody's garden. Found most prominently when they get large and they're full of eggs, their abdomen swells right up in September time. The underside of a garden spider, just to point out the anatomy, basic anatomy of a spider. Body divided into two parts. Here we've got the large abdomen at the top. This is the underside, remember. And the cephalothorax. Most of the appendages come off the cephalothorax. 8 legs, 2 palps. Here are 2 jaws, pair of jaws or fangs with the poison claw. All spiders have poison. Of the 105 families, there's just one exception. There's only one family that doesn't actually have venom. All the other 104 do have. So they can all bite. But of course, in the vast majority of cases, the venom is not very, very toxic to humans. So the palps, and then on the other side you've got the eyes. Going back to the abdomen, there are the 2 book lungs, either side of the female sex organ. And at the very end, you've got a little battery of spinnerets there. And that is where the silk comes out. The silk is manufactured in the abdomen in as many as 6 silk glands. That silk is stored within the glands as a liquid form, but as the silk comes out, it changes to solid form. And it changes because of an alteration in the molecular structure, because it's being drawn out. The silk does not dry in air. And that is proved by the water spiders that build webs underwater. So this is changing as it comes out from the solid from the liquid to the solid state. And what you can see here is many, many very, very fine filaments of silk. As this spider is turning the insect it's caught in its legs, it's pulling that silk out. Silk is not squeezed out of an abdomen like toothpaste out of a tube. It's always pulled out. Now all these incredibly fine filaments can coalesce to make threads of the web, which you can see are fatter. Spider silk itself is a really remarkable material. It's said to be as strong as steel, thickness for thickness, but of course we're talking here incredibly fine. It's as strong as steel, but it's actually more elastic, so it can take the shocks of an insect hitting the web. What this spider is doing is making a swathing band of the prey it's caught. This is the same kind of spider that we've just seen, an Argiope, and it's sitting in the middle of its orb web, and this particular group of spiders is recognized by the zigzag decoration in the web. It's called the staglementum. And it is actually a bit of a mystery as to why the spider puts that in, because it does seem to draw attention to the spider. It's something you wouldn't have thought they would want to do. In fact, some Argiopids have 4 of these zigzag converging on the centre. The theories why the stabilimentum is there include it's there to strengthen the web, or it reflects ultraviolet light and so attracts insects to the web, or it's a warning to birds to keep clear of the web. To be honest, we're not really sure what exactly is the reason for it, but it is characteristic of this genus, Argiopids. This is every arachnophobic's ultimate nightmare. We've got here webs everywhere, and they're big webs. These are the webs of this spider here, the golden orb weaver, which in fact is a huge spider. This is in the tropics. This is in Southeast Asia. This photograph was taken, and you can see the leg span of this spider is something like 6 inches. So we've got many of these golden orb weavers or nephilas in web after web. While I was there, even the hair on the back of my neck was standing up, because everywhere you looked was a spider's web. Now that's the females, these 6-inch leg span spiders, but among here you can also see, oops, sorry, some tiny males. Well, they're so tiny you probably can't see them. If we move to this shot, this is the same species of spider, Nephila antipodiana of Southeast Asia. A female, big female, sitting there, and she has 2 males on her body, preparing to mate. There's one. So you see what I mean by spider diversity. This is sexual dimorphism. Spiders are incredibly varied, even in the same species. So there is a male mating with a female, and he can do it safely because he's too small for her to bother to eat. Another of the same species. There's the female, and there's the male above her. Again, you can tell it's a male because of the boxing gloves there on the ends of these palps. But one word of warning, not all small spiders in the web of a big female like this is actually the male. Sometimes they're parasitic spiders of a different species that are simply there to share the food collected by the big female, the web owner. Here's another orb web weaver. This is a slim-bodied one called Tetranatha, common in this country. And their web is arranged horizontally rather than vertically. It's still the same 2-dimensional orb web, and often they build their web across streams. So the web goes from one side of this small stream to another, and that proves the point, you know, that they have to float that line across the gap. They certainly can't swim the first line when they make the web. This is an unusual spider, a rarity in this country, the triangle spider. There's its web, it's shaped like a triangle, but it forms a kind of living link in that line there. There's the spider supporting the web, holding it all the time, and then when an insect comes along, contacts the web, the spider immediately lets out more line, the web collapses around the prey. So that's how that one catches its insects. This is also a species which builds webs. This is the ladybird spider. Totally different kind of web. In fact, the silk is very different. This is woolly silk. This is known as a lace web weaver. And this silk is not sticky. It's not rebuilt every day. But it's incredibly woolly and is tremendous for snagging the legs of insects. And here we have another example of the difference between the male and the female. This is the male on the right and the big female on the left. Called the ladybird spider because he mimics a ladybird. This male, when he goes searching for a female, he really exposes himself walking across open country and gains protection by looking like a ladybird, which are distasteful insects, so predators won't eat him. But the female that hides under stones and things doesn't look like a ladybird. This is an absolute rarity in Britain. It's found at one location only in Dorset, the ladybird spider. Much more common in the Mediterranean region. So far we've talked about web spinning spiders, but at least 50% of spiders don't build webs, though they all have silk for various purposes. For example, for wrapping up egg sacs, or for safety lines. Lots of uses, spiders making nests. And this is one of the spiders that doesn't build a web. It's a trapdoor spider. It has a burrow in the ground which is lined with silk and then builds a trapdoor on top. You just cannot see these when the trapdoor is closed. They're absolutely impossible. But when the door opens, the spider emerges, and in fact they're incredibly quick. When they sense an insect going by, the lid comes up, they shoot out like lightning, grab the insect, turn around, back down again, close the lid in the blink of an eye. They're incredibly fast and very strong. One of these trapdoor spiders has been measured to exert a force of 14 ounces in holding tight its trapdoor lid. That is 140 times the weight of the spider, which is the equivalent in human terms, for a human, of having to exert a force of 10 tons. Another of this big group of hunting spiders that don't have webs, a crab spider. Its tactics are simply to sit in a flower and wait for a pollinating insect to visit. Grabs it, a quick bite with a very, very potent venom, in the case of these small crab spiders, and the bee dies very quickly, including even the big bumblebees, which of course are much bigger than the crab spider. Another hunting type of spider, a little bit like a wolf spider, this one. It's in fact called the nursery web spider. It has some strange habits, this one. It carries its egg sac around with it wherever it goes, and you can see it's walking on tiptoes, so it's quite awkward the way it's doing it. But when those eggs are ready to hatch, it then constructs around the egg sac a nursery web. This is not a web to catch insects, but simply to protect the babies when they hatch. This nursery web spider is also known for another unusual habit, and that is the way the male gives the female a bridal gift when he comes courting, and that is a wrapped fly, so that while she's opening the package, he mates with her. One of the very pretty jumping spiders. Now, I mentioned that there are 105 families of spiders in the world. This is the biggest family. There are 35,000 plus species of spiders in the world, and this one family, the Salticidae, is numbers more than 4,000 species of spiders. That's just one species you're looking at here, Philaeus chrysops from southern Europe. In the tropics, this is the dominant family. They're very, very common, and as I say, mostly very pretty species, but stalk their prey, creeping up on them, and then finally jumping onto the insect to catch it. They are active during the daytime, which is unusual for spiders. Most are nocturnal, because they've got very, very good eyesight. One interesting thing, though they're the most common in the tropics, one of the jumping spiders has the record for being found at the highest altitude in the world, and that's 22,000 feet on Everest. A species of jumping spider holds that record. Here's another jumping spider, and this view shows the unusually developed eyes. So 8 eyes, like that tarantula we saw earlier on. 4 at the front, 2 principal eyes, like the headlamps of a car, with 2 side lights on the either side. They can really focus on an image, those central eyes, and can identify whether it's looking at an insect as prey, or perhaps as a mate, as a female, up to 30 centimeters. So that is remarkable in terms of spiders. And then there's 4 other eyes arranged on the top of the cephalothorax, and they can detect insects flying overhead, perhaps. So if it sees an insect flying overhead, it can then orientate, bring those two main eyes to view the insect. And then it starts creeping towards it. What's happening here, though, is this spider, this is a male, and it's displaying to a female. And this, again, is because they're very, very visual, these jumping spiders. The male and female see each other, and he's beautifully patterned, and she can recognize the design of this spider. That, again, I'm sorry to say, is not a British species. It's one found in southern Europe. Saetes barbipes. Here is a jumping spider from North America, one of the genus Phidippus. You can see the jaws on this one are beautifully coloured with a green iridescence. This mother of Phidippus here, she has actually built a nursery web for her spiderlings. And there you can see them there. Now, this is a more typical hunting spider. This is very, very common in the tropics all around the world. It's known in this country as the banana spider because for decades they've been coming together with bunches of bananas from the Caribbean area or from Africa. And in these tropical regions, this is the common house spider. Lives on walls or ceilings, and in fact they're welcomed because they eat cockroaches. So people are not afraid of these like we are of the Tegenarias. This one is holding on to its egg sac. Though they come into this country in huge numbers for 100+ years, it's never ever established a colony in Britain. It is simply, it's not warm enough. The same family of spiders, but a much, much rarer species. This is also a huntsman type of spider, and beautifully camouflaged, I think you'll agree. Sitting on a tree trunk. This is not active during the night, but it's resting here during the day. But it's not so switched off that it wouldn't be surprised by an arachnologist, and it will immediately shoot round the other side of the tree if you approach too close. A similar theme, but a totally different kind of spider here. This one is beautifully camouflaged as well. It's a tropical species again. The previous one was from forests in Southeast Asia. This is also from Southeast Asia, but this is on an orb web. But the orb web is built flat against the rock. Just after I took this picture, a dragonfly landed on this web and was caught by the spider. The dragonfly hadn't seen that web there. Right, at this point, I can offer a choice. We can go to venomous spiders, or we can have a look at maternal care. There's venomous spiders, or as a mating scene, a little story about mating in spiders. So I wonder if you would like to make a choice.
Well, before we do that, there's also a chance, if anyone's got any questions that they want to ask before we move into these sections, it's a chance to do that. Is anything anybody's always wanted to know about spiders but have been afraid to ask? No? I've actually got one. I've always wondered, how do they not get caught in their own webs if the webs are so sticky?
Yeah, it's a good question. It is said, in fact, that if you pick a spider up and throw it back into its own web, I'm echoing a lot now. Why is that? Sorry. It will get stuck. The spider knows where to walk, and also it has its tarsi anointed with an anti-stick substance. So as it runs around its web, it never gets stuck. But you pick it up and throw it back, and it will get stuck. I haven't tried that, though, because it's a bit cruel. But that's what they say.
Okay. Well, we do have a question here. Hold on.
I just want to know, do the spiders wait till their prey dies, or do they kill it, or do they just sort of wrap it up and suffocate it and then eat it?
Mostly they bite it, and that starts the process of digestion. That's one of the important things about venom. It's not just used for defense, but it also begins to digest the insect. So, I mean, they grab it alive, bite it, and it's starting already to make a soup inside that insect, which they then suck back, because they don't eat solid food. They suck the remains, the decomposed, digested remains of an insect.
Another question here for you, Paul.
Which is the scariest spider in this system?
Well, in Britain, it's that big Tegenaria, I think it's true to say. But, of course, in terms of venomous spiders, there's the famous black widow. People are very afraid of those. And in fact, if we go to the venomous section, I can show you what a black widow looks like.
Okay, well, we might do a bit of democracy here. Looking at the choices we have, how many people want to see more on venomous spiders? 1, 2, 3, a lot. Okay, we might go to that one next then. But we do have one more question for you, Paul, before you do.
Which is the dominant spider, the male or the female?
Normally the female, because she's bigger. Yes, that's right. And that's why the male has to be very careful he doesn't get eaten when he gets too close. This is a really big problem for the male spider. So it's the female, yeah.
Okay, we might move on to hearing about venomous spiders now.
Yeah. We mentioned the black widow. This is the spider that is most famous for being highly venomous. Only a tiny minority of spiders are very, very toxic to humans if bitten. And this is one of the most well-known. Not found in this country, not a resident here, but quite often arrive here in grapes. Now, they're not big spiders. They're only the size of your fingernail, about maybe the size of a black grape. And typically they come here from California, in Californian grapes. And that red hourglass marking, if you see that, then it's unmistakable. You've got a black widow. There's nothing else looks like that. This year, a lot of black widows came in grapes, and one supermarket even claimed that it was a good thing. It was beneficial. They were saying it's, you know, they eat the insects in the grapes and prove that the grapes are organic. What could be better? But I think they did misjudge the public reaction. And there was some concern. I mean, a lot of newspapers printed this story this year. So the venom of the black widow is classed as neurotoxic. You don't feel any pain at the site of the bite, but it blocks the nerve muscle junctions in your body, particularly around your stomach, and your stomach muscles go into cramp. So you double over in extreme pain, and you can eventually die as a result of respiratory paralysis. But there are very, very few deaths. They're incredibly rare these days. One, there's an anti-venom available, certainly in North America where these spiders live. And two, the spiders themselves are not aggressive. You've really got to have an accident. You've got to squash one. And the next time a live one comes here, I'm going to put it on my hand, let it walk up my arm, you know, because it's never going to bite me. But people are afraid of them by reputation. Now, the genus Latrodectus, of which the black widow is one, Latrodectus mactans, we were looking at, is actually found around the world in warm climates, places typically where grapes grow. And this is the Australian equivalent. This is the redback. So you see the red is on the top side of the abdomen here, as opposed to the underside. Very common in outdoor dunnies. Is that right?
Yes, it is.
So that's the redback. Here in Europe, we also have one of the Latrodectus, a relative of the black widow. And in France, southern France and Corsica, this is known as the Malmignette. Very pretty spider, but not actually very common. We do have in Britain, well, we have a number of spiders that could be mistaken for black widows. I call them the false widow spiders. This is a very good example. It's not actually a British resident, but it has come many times in grapes from the Mediterranean area. For example, they're very common in Spain, and they are in the same family as the black widow. So this also causes concern when this is found. This is Steatoda peculianus. Here, though, is actually a true British resident, common in the south of England and also into southwest. Steatoda grossa. So this, I mean, people when they find this, they think they've got a black widow. There's no red on it at all, though. Again, it's only a small spider, size of your fingernail, but it's this round, shiny body. There, by the way, is the egg sac. So that's Steatoda grossa, quite common. It can bite. But if you suffered a bite, you wouldn't really feel much more than a bit of pain and swelling. 24 hours maximum, that's all.
Paul, we've got another question here for you.
All right.
How many spiders did you find from England?
650 is the number of species found in England. So it's quite a good, it's a nice hobby actually to go out and see how many species you can find. Yeah.
And which spider did you find first?
Well, the house spiders, I mean, they come to you. That's the trouble. Then there's the garden spider. And then start looking for the zebra spider on the walls of the house or on fences. Little black and white striped jumping spider. That's one of my favourites. The best time to start looking is in April, May, in nice spring weather. You can also see the baby spiders. I'm going to show you a picture, if you've got time, of the garden spider. Hatches at that time. This is another one of the false widows. This one has come from Canary Islands and Madeira, and it has established colonies in this country, and it does bite. It's caused a number of people. I don't want to spread too much alarm, but you should know what's happening. This is the woodlouse spider, so called because it feeds on woodlice, which is something that few spiders will tackle. Woodlouse being a tough creature, but it's got quite a substantial pair of jaws, this. So it can bite. It's reddish in appearance and strangely lacks hairs, if you notice. So that's the woodlouse spider. Right, quickly to the...
Just before we do, we've got one more question over here.
Which spider did you find first, which was poisonous?
Which is the most poisonous?
Which is the first poisonous spider that was found?
I reckon it must have been the black widow because, yeah, when people went to America, you know, discovered America, I think they must have discovered the black widow at the same time.
Before we move on to our next chapter, were there any other questions around here that I've missed? Yep, okay, just hold on.